Hi good people, welcome to lesson 3 of learning HTML course for absolute beginners. In this lesson, we'll be introducing you to HTML to enable you get started with it, and we'll cover some topics such as what is HTML and World Wide Web, understanding whether HTML is a programming language or not, look at HTML elements, attributes, whether to use single or double quotes in HTML, structure of an HTML document, using white spaces in HTML, how to include special characters in HTML, and last but not least, how to use HTML comments. I've also shared links to other related resources to this video in the video description below. What is HTML? HTML is a component of the web. From our previous topic of Internet and Web Fundamentals, we learned that World Wide Web is an interconnected system of public web pages accessible through the Internet. These web pages and documents are interconnected by means of hyperlinks that users click on for information. This information can be in different formats, and including text, images, and audio content. Check on the video description below for that video on World Wide Web. We learned that World Wide Web has 4 components, which are HTTP, URL, hyperlink, and HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's a markup language that tells web browsers how to structure the web pages you visit. HTML consists of a series of elements which you use to enclose, wrap, or mark up different parts of the content to make it appear or act in a certain way. The enclosing tags can make content into a hyperlink to connect to another page, italicize words, and so on. Good people, a markup language uses tags to define elements within a document. It is human readable, meaning that markup files contain standard words rather than typical programming syntax. For example, paragraph is denoted by letter P, heading by letter H, and division denoted by div element. While several markup languages exist, the 2 most popular are HTML and XML. Good people, I have gone to my computer, created a folder lesson _003, opened my Visual Studio Code, go to file and open that folder using Visual Studio Code. Then inside that folder, I have created a new HTML file and have given it name index.html. Look at the convention in which I have defined the name of my file as index.html, and the word index I've written it in lowercase. This is how you create an HTML file. Consider the following line of text when written as a plain text and when written using HTML tags referred to as paragraph tags. This is how it's written using the plain text, and if I want to write it using the paragraph tag, what am I going to do? I have to start with opening tags and end with the closing tag, because this is a paragraph we want to define, so we use the paragraph tags. Then inside the opening and closing tags is where our content appears in. So the first line, welcome to HTML course for absolute beginners, is when it is written using the plain text, but with the second line is when it's written using the HTML paragraph element. From our definition, when we look at this, we have various sections. Number 1, that's the opening and closing tags. Number 2, content and the elements. The opening tags consist of the name of the element, in this example P for paragraph, wrapped inside opening and closing angle brackets. This is the opening tag. This opening tag marks where the elements begins. In this example, it precedes the start of the paragraph text. The second section is the content. This is the content that's welcome to HTML course for absolute beginners. In this example, it represents the paragraph text. Then the last section is the closing tag. This is the closing tag. This is the same as the opening tag, except that it includes a forward slash before the element name. This marks where the element ends. Good people, is HTML a programming language or not? Unlike other high-level languages such as Java, PHP, Python, or C++, HTML is not a programming language because of, number one, HTML does not allow for the use of variables, use of conditional statements such as switch, if, and if else, and does not provide any iterative looping structures such as for each, for, and do while. Number two, HTML does not allow for logic, control, data storage, and retrieval of anything else that a programming language should do. We have seen from the definition, HTML is a markup language that uses tags to define elements within a document. Just to let you know, for anything to qualify as a computer programming language, it must do away to program this aspect of computer, CPU, and how it works or how it does. Number one, read data out of its memory, perform conditional logic on that data, and lastly, iteratively perform that logic at a lightning speed. Hence, HTML is not a programming language. Nesting elements means placing one element inside another element. An element that is placed inside another element, that element is said to be nested. Consider these two lines of paragraph. Welcome to HTML course for absolute beginners. Element that's strong is placed or is enclosed inside the paragraph tags. So, strong is said to be nested inside the paragraph element. And this is the correct way of nesting one element inside another element. The strong element is an inline element. When you look at the second line of paragraph, this is a wrong way of nesting element, as the opening tag of the strong element is placed inside the paragraph, the opening and the closing paragraph tags, and the closing tag of the strong element is placed outside the paragraph, the closing paragraph tag. By doing like this, it will render the page, but syntactically it will be wrong, as it will give error when rendering the page. I want us to look the difference between the block level and inline level elements. Block level elements are elements that appear on a new line following the content that precedes it. Any content that follows a block level element also appears on a new line. Examples of block level elements are headings and paragraph. They cannot be placed inside an inline element. For example, I love eating. If you view this on a browser, this is how it's going to appear. Then I'm also going to include another paragraph element just below it. So the second paragraph or the second block level element, that's ripe bananas, automatically appears below the first level block level element that is defined by h1 tags. So the two, the h1 and the paragraph tags, are example of block level element. Inline elements are elements that are contained within a block level element and do not cause a new line to appear in the document. For example, using the first example, if I'm defining a block level element, I love eating ripe bananas. So this is a block level element. Assuming I want to make ripe bananas be bold using the strong tag, that's ripe bananas. If I try to refresh my browser, ripe bananas does not appear on a new line. But if you will have used another block level element, automatically it will appear on a new line. Using also the span tag, that's I love eating, another span, ripe bananas, and I try to refresh this page, you will see both of them don't appear on the both of them just appear on the same line. Consider the second line where we are having two inline elements. That's the span enclosing the first set of text, I love eating, and the second set of text, ripe bananas, enclosed within a span. So the second set of text does not appear on a new line. Good people, inline elements cannot nest block level element. For example, using an inline element strong, that's I love eating, then I define the block level element, that is ripe bananas. This one is syntactically wrong, as browser will not interpret it correctly. So always ensure block level element nest the inline element, but not the other way round. Good people, we have just seen that HTML elements, they contain opening and closing tags, enclosing the contents residing inside between the two. But we have other type of elements that are referred to as the void elements. These are type of elements that contain single tags, unlike others which do have both the opening and closing tags. Some of the examples of the void elements are the input, that's the form input element, the image element, the meta element, and the horizontal rule element. When you are defining this type of element, you don't have to include the closing tag. Just look at the convention in which I've used in defining all the four elements highlighted here. These are example of what we refer to as the void elements. Majority of this will be interacting with them in the upcoming videos in these tutorials. What are HTML attributes? HTML attributes give extra information about the element that won't appear in the content. Looking at this example, the class attribute is an identifying name used to target the element with the CSS style information. Another good example, if you want to create a link in HTML document, you are going to use the anger tag. Then you are going to give the first attribute of href. Then this attribute specifies the web address for the link. For example, https, that is google.com. Another attribute is the title. You declare the title attribute like this. Then you give name of the title to your anger tag. Let me say Google homepage. Another attribute is the target attribute. You declared it like this. Then you give the target value either blank, parent, or self. Then once you are done with the giving attribute, you close the HTML anger tag, and in between the closing and the opening anger tag, you give the name of your link. Let's say visit Google home page. So if I try to refresh my browser like this is how I have defined a link that when a user clicks on it, automatically the user will be taken to the Google homepage. Just to repeat, an anger can make the text it encloses into hyperlink. Angers can take a number of attributes, but the several are the one as highlighted below. The href specifies the web address for the link. Then the title specifies the extra information about the link. And lastly, the target attribute specifies how you want to open the link. It contains some values such as blank, parent, and self. Good people, there are other type of attributes that are referred to as the Boolean attributes. These are attributes without any value. From our previous examples, we have seen that an attribute should have a value, but with the Boolean attributes, they can only have one value, which is generally the same as the attribute name. For example, when you're dealing with HTML form and you want to define an input that has a value of disabled, in that a user cannot click or cannot enter value on that input text. For example, when dealing with HTML form, assume you want to define an input field that is disabled. Obviously, you are going to use the HTML input element like this. Then you give it the type attribute. Let's say it is text. And because we want this input field to be disabled, so you're going to use the disabled attribute and give it the value of disabled. Remember, this input element is an example of a void element. So this is how you enclose it. You don't have to use that's a closing tag. And from my definition, I've said that Boolean attributes can only have one value, which is generally the same as the attribute name. With this example, I can still rewrite the example like this and just enter the attribute value as the name of the value. Both the two are just the same. If you decide to have the attribute value and the equal sign and having the value inside the quotation, is just the same as entering the name of the attribute in the input field. Good people, we have just seen that when declaring HTML element attributes value, they should be enclosed either within a single or a double quote. The question that you are asking yourself right now, are you supposed to use either single or double quote? To answer that question, You are free to choose whether to use single or double quote when writing attributes. With the first example, where I'm defining a link that leads to Google homepage, we see we have used the anchor tag, and with the first attribute that says href, I've used the double quotes, also with the titles. With the second example, I have used the single quote, both in the href attribute and the title attribute. With the third example is a wrong way of using both the double and the single quote. If you decide to use double quote, please make sure that you use double quote. If you decide to use the single quote, make sure that you use the single quote. It's wrong with this example to use the single quote and the double quote at the same time when defining the value to an HTML attribute. If you use one type of quote, you can include the other type of quote inside your attribute value. For example, the line number 7 under the title, you have seen that I'm declaring the value to my title, go to Google's homepage, inside the double quote. Then I've also used a single quote after Google. So you can also declare it like this. You can also use HTML special characters entities. For example, the special character entities for apostrophe is defined like this. If you don't want to use a single quote after Google and homepage, between Google and homepage, you can use special HTML entities. We'll be covering more about this HTML special entities or special characters in our next video. Do white space in HTML matter? No matter how much white space you use inside HTML element content, the HTML parser reduces each sequence of white space to a single space when rendering the code, which means white space are ignored in HTML document. Consider these two types of paragraphs that we have declared here. The first one is written without any white space, but the second one is written with some spaces or white spaces. When rendering, the HTML parser will ignore the white spaces in the second line paragraph. And you can see from our browser, both the two paragraphs are rendered the same way without any white space. So white space in HTML page or in HTML web page or HTML documents, they are just ignored. Now, after understanding what is HTML, what are HTML elements, how you can nest HTML elements, block versus inline elements, void elements, elements attributes, it's a question that we now need to ask ourselves: what is the ideal structure of a HTML document? So this is what we're going to look in this section of this video. Any HTML document contains the following parts. The first part is what we refer to as the doc type, and this is how we define the doc type. Doc type, all HTML document must start with the doc type. This is a declaration which tells the browser the document type to be expected as HTML. It's not case sensitive. You can either decide to write it using small letter like this, or using the capital letter like that. Then the second part of the structure of an ideal HTML document is the element HTML that has both the opening tag and the closing tag. This element wraps all the content on the page. It is sometimes known as the root element, which defines the beginning and the end of the HTML document. So good people, any HTML document should have the HTML elements, both the opening and the closing tags. This simply defines the entry point of your HTML document. Then the third part of the HTML document is the head section. Head section, this is how it's defined. Head acts as a container for everything you want to include on the HTML page that is not the content of the page and to not show to the viewers. This includes things such as keywords and page description that will appear in search result, CSS, style, content, character set, declaration, and more. So if you have any content that you don't want to appear as part of the main HTML document but gives meaningful description to the page, such as the meta, is defined under the head tag. The fourth part of an ideal structure for HTML page is the title that is wrapped inside the head element. This sets the title of the page, which is the set title that appears in the browser tab, the page where the page is loaded. The page title is also used to describe the page when it is being bookmarked. So if you want to define the title to your HTML page, you begin with the opening tag of the title and the closing tag of the title. Then in between the opening and the closing tag is where your title goes in. For example, with my case, I will say this is title to this HTML page. So if I try to view this inside a browser, on the top of the browser you will see the name of the title that you have entered as title to this HTML page. The last part of the HTML page is the body tag. This contains all the content that displays on the page, including things such as text, images, videos, games, playable audio tracks, or anything else. The body tag wraps all the content that you want appear on the page. For example, if I want to define a paragraph tag, or if I want to define a paragraph that is displayed on a web browser, or you want a user to see, it should be done inside the body tag. As you can see, the paragraph that I have just defined here is displayed on the home page or the page of the browser. Just to wrap up, any HTML document contains the following 5 parts. The first part is the doc type. Doc type, we see that all HTML document must start with the doc type declaration, which tells the browser the document type to be expected as HTML document. Then the second part is the HTML. That's the HTML, both the opening and the closing tags. This element wraps all the content on the page. It's sometimes known as the root element, which defines the beginning and end of the HTML document. Then the third part is the head, which acts as a container for everything you want to include on the HTML page. Then the fourth one is the title, which says the title of your HTML page. And the last one is the body. The body contains all the content that displays on the page, including text, images, videos, games, playable audio tracks, and anything else. Good people, we have just seen that in HTML, characters such as less than, greater than, double quote, single quote, and ampersands, they are special type of characters and they cannot just be used anyhowly. Supposing you want to use them in HTML paragraph. For example, you want to use a greater than or less than symbol. How are you going to use it when you have just seen this type of characters that are used to define tags? They are special characters in HTML document. For you to use the greater than and less than symbol, this is what you are going to do. For you to use the less than symbol, you begin with the ampersand. You begin with the ampersand like this, then followed by letter L, then followed by letter T, and the semicolon. Then you enter P. For you to define the greater than symbol, begin with the ampersand like this, then letter G for greater than and T for than, then you close with the semicolon symbol. If you try to view this on your web browser, this is what you're going to see. So these two are special characters in HTML. I cannot go and use the brackets directly here, as it will be interpreted as a tag in HTML document. If you want to use a quote inside a paragraph, you will begin with the ampersand, then followed by Q for quote like this, then T, then you close it with what? With the semicolon. Then I can say this is a paragraph inside double quotes. So if I want to include another double quote, I start with the ampersand followed by the word quote, then I close it to the semicolon. So if I refresh this page, you will see that this paragraph or this sentence is enclosed inside a double quote. Supposing you want to use an apostrophe in this paragraph, this is Hamina's special, this is Hamina's special cut, like this. I want to replace the apostrophe with its special HTML entity character. What am I going to do? I will start with the ampersand like that, followed by APOS, then I end this special character using what? A semicolon. So if I try to refresh this, you see the result is the same, but in this case I have replaced the apostrophe with its special characters. Good people, below this video description I've shared with you a link to most of the commonly used HTML special character entities that you can look at your own free time. Good people, what are HTML comments and how do we define them? HTML comments are not displayed in the browser, but they can help document your HTML source code. They are defined using the left and right angle brackets with an exclamation mark, with the comment content placed between the 4 dashes. Look at this example. So here, between the 4 dashes and the exclamation mark and the angle brackets, I'm going to enter the content of my comment. For example, This is an example of HTML comment. So by viewing my browser, you can be able to see the content of the paragraph. This is the paragraph to the page, but you cannot be able to see the content of the HTML comment. In other words, HTML comments are not displayed on the browser. But if I try to view the source code of this browser, I can be able to see where I placed my HTML comment. So in other words, HTML comments can help you document your HTML source code. Since I'm also using live server extension here, you can be able to see there are some codes and HTML comment that have been injected by the live server itself.